Yes, thank you very much indeed for the kind invitation, and I'm really happy to be here in this university for the second time. The first time was exactly 4 years ago, and within these 4 years very many things have changed, as you all know. First of all, I have to complain the decease of my very good friend and colleague Wolfgang Schultz, who was here 4 years ago, and with him I was able to discuss very many things that I will talk about today in my keynote. He was a scholar who was, I would say, for me, the most important partner in working on Caucasian Albanian, and it's really a huge loss that he no longer is with us. This was in April 2020, and my presentation of today will be dedicated to his memory. Ever since, many other things have changed. We have all witnessed the biggest pandemic of the world in the 21st century, and I'm extremely happy to be here in a conference that is not online. I'm not seeing you via Zoom or something like this, but I'm seeing you and meeting you in person, which is very different from meeting persons just via the computer screen. The pandemic is not yet over, and yet there are other big problems that we've been facing. Armenia has been facing a war, and now all the world is facing a war, and I do hope that this will not be the beginning of the second nuclear war in this world. I hope that this conference will contribute a bit to understanding, as the rector said, to the mutual understanding of people not only within this region but very far beyond. Having said this, I would like to proceed to my keynote, and for this task I would ask you to switch it on. I will have to place myself here in order to see what I'm talking about, because I don't have a screen here. Let me see whether I can move it. So I will be talking about Caucasian Albanian present knowledge and how it was achieved. Many of you will know that the famous Armenian historiographer Koryun wrote in his life of Mesrop Nashtots that Mesrop invented not only the alphabet, for the Armenian language, but also created an alphabet for the neighbors of the Armenians, who were the Albanians, with the help of a certain Benjamin. And beyond that, he also provided help to the Albanians to get their first literary text, which was Bible translations, so the translation of the divine scriptures, and they were also skilled in the prophets and well acquainted with the apostles and heirs to the Gospels ever after. But until 1937, nobody really knew what this was about and whether this was a historical information that was reliable or not. Until in 1937, a Georgian scholar, Ilya Abuladze, detected here in Yerevan, in the Mate-Nararan, a manuscript which contained, among others, an alphabet of the so-called Albanian script, the script that, according to Koryun, was invented by Mesrop Nashtots. The manuscript in question, number 7117, contains a list of several alphabets, among them, of course, the Armenian, but also the Georgian, the Greek, Syriac, etc. And on these 2 pages, you see the Albanian alphabet. It begins here and continues to the right-hand side, and as you can see, test whether it works. It's given there the information that the alphabet of the Albanians contained 52 letters, many more than the alphabets of the Armenians or the Georgians. And there were several attempts early to decipher these alphabet lists, which was possible because, as you can see here, under every single character there was written in Armenian letters the names of the characters, and the name, of course, of the characters indicate, as in the other alphabets, the sound value of every single letter. And so people like Akakishanidze, Ashot Abramyan, Voroshil Gugasian, and Sergei Muravyov came to certain analyses of this alphabet on the basis of the alphabet list. up to the number of 52. And Ilya Abuladze, in his first publication on the alphabet, expressed his own prognosis that if we now have found the alphabet of the Albanians, why shouldn't we also find some texts written in the Albanian script? And he was really hopeful that this would be achieved soon. But yet we had to wait for another 60 years until indeed the first Albanian texts were detected. This was also the work of a scholar from Georgia, Zaza Alexidze, who detected in the monastery of St. Catherine's on Mount Sinai some Georgian manuscripts with an undertext, palimpsests with an undertext that was written in an unknown script, and he was the one who proposed that this might be the Caucasian Albanian script. This is one specimen of those palimpsests. You can see the Georgian overtext in black, but if you look exactly in the middle vertically, you can see that there are some characters visible in brown, and this is the undertext that was erased, as it's usual for palimpsest. It was erased and then overwritten. And we can enlarge it so you can see a bit better, or even yet a bit better. You can see that there is something there that is neither Armenian nor Georgian, but that is in a third script of a similar type. And of course, it was a good idea to think that this might be Caucasian Albanian. And these were the first attempts by Zaza Alexidze to identify those characters on the basis of the alphabet list, and he, for example, also pointed to abbreviations which are quite similar to the abbreviations that we find in Armenian or Georgian manuscripts of the first millennium. I've just only arrived 5 o'clock in the morning, so if I'm a bit unconcentrated, so I have to apologize. Okay. During the years 1990 to 2005, our colleagues from Georgia were busy providing a catalogue of the so-called new finds of St. Catherine's Monastery, among which they had found these palimpsests. And the catalogue was produced and published in 2005. This is the working group, and you see Zaza Alexidze, Zeka Lashanidze, and others in the monastery of St. Catherine's on Mount Sinai. And for 2 manuscripts, they provided descriptions that exactly stated the knowledge of 2005, namely, for number 13, that it's a palimpsest and the underwriting is mostly Caucasian Albanian, some of it is in Armenian. This is an example, and you will see that it's not easy to detect that there is something underneath the Georgian overtext. And the same is true for a second codex that was found, number N55. Also, here they wrote that this is a palimpsest, the underwriting is mostly Caucasian Albanian. For some leaves, it's Armenian, and there are also 15 small fragments. In 1999, we decided to work on an edition of these palimpsests in order to revive or re-establish the Albanian language. And the first step that we took was ultraviolet images. Until then, ultraviolet images was the normal way in order to make the undertext of palimpsests a bit better visible or readable than with a normal naked eye. And you can see the blue ultraviolet image on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side you can see that the undertext is much better visible than you would have it in a color image. And from 2003 to 2008, we had a common project to provide this edition. Here you see the group consisting of Jean-Pierre Maillet, Zaza Alexidze, myself, and Wolfgang Schultz working on together in Frankfurt University, in Goethe University, in a building that no longer pertains to the university. And this was our work on Mount Sinai. In 2004, in October, Zaza Alexidze and Jean-Pierre Maillet and the son of Zaza and myself went to Mount Sinai in order to analyze every single sheet, every single folio of those palimpsests. And what we did was not just ultraviolet imaging, but what we call multi-spectral imaging. This is taking images in different wavelengths of the visible and non-visible light, and then comparing those images, which makes it even better readable what is underneath the overtext. And here you can see a double page, which consists of the Albanian undertext and the Georgian overtext. The Albanian undertext is from the Bible. Actually, all texts that we have are biblical texts, and it's from Acts of Apostles, chapter 13, and the only text from the Old Testament that we have from the prophet Isaiah. And you can see in the right-hand side that it's much better readable than what we had ever before. Unfortunately, the font doesn't come out here, so otherwise you would see that I've tried to render the Albanian script also in the rendering of the computer in a different format. I will be able to show it to you. So it's important that we can now read every single letter that is there, and that we can establish the text, and this is of course the condition in order to be able to identify the biblical passages that we have before us. This is a bit better readable in a Latin translation, and you see that the language is something very different from anything you might know or have heard of, but you will see that it has, so to say, a successor in the Caucasus even today. A very important thing is that it's not only biblical texts, but it's biblical texts with titles. Here, for example, you have the title that the following is the reading from the book of the prophet Isaiah. And then you also have marginal notes written in very small characters, and they indicate when such a reading, when such a lecture was read in the church. So this is a reading for the Sunday of the blind and the weak, which is sometime between Easter and Pentecost. In 2008, then, we were able to finish our work on the edition of the Palincests, and this was published in 2 big volumes in the series Monumenta Paleographica Medievi, series Ibero-Caucasica, together with Wolfgang Schultz, Zaza Alexidze, and Jean-Pierre Maillet. And in the edition, we tried to reproduce both the readable text of the palimpsest and its transcription into the original script. Here, luckily, it works, so you can see that the script can be used nowadays for printing. It's even part of the Unicode standard nowadays. And here you can see that we even tried to make visible the distribution of main text titles in a smaller script within the lines, and marginal notes that are also written in minor characters. And this is here the beginning of the reading from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 2, which is the story about Christmas. In the edition, we also provided a so-called editio minor, a minor edition, which renders the text into a Latin transliteration together with a close English translation. And here you can see that there is a title reading from the Holy Gospel of Luke and the beginning of the 2nd chapter of the Gospel. So the results of the edition project were the following. First of all, the 2 Georgian codexes that were identified as palimpsests containing Albanian represent one codex. They are simply fallen apart. They were found together with the other so-called new finds in the monastery, and they were kept in a cellar room where they were eaten by mice, and it was really a terrible thing, but anyway, we are lucky to have those palimpsests in this way. They comprise in their undertexts the remnants of 6 original manuscripts. 2 of them are Albanian, from 2 different codices. One is a codex containing John's Gospel, and the other one is a lectionary. That means a book that contains lections, readings from different parts of the Bible. All in all, it's 84 folios in number 13 and 38 folios in number 55. Then we have two Armenian undertexts, one containing the Pauline letters, or parts of them, and one parts of the books that were authored by King Solomon in the Old Testament, and they consist of 23 folios in N13 and 19 folios in N55. One folio of the undertext is Old Georgian, and two folios are in Palestinian Aramaic. The reading rate that was possible on the basis of the multispectral images was between 30 and 95%. In the best cases, we could nearly read all the page. In some cases, we could just guess, and just two folios remained undetermined. But science never stops. And in 2012, a new project was launched by Arcadia Foundation, and this is the so-called Sinai Palimpsest project, which aims at providing multispectral images of all palimpsests that are present in St. Catherine's Monastery, and this is quite a lot of Greek and Georgian and Syriac and other palimpsests. And they also provided new images, and better images, of the palimpsest that we are talking about. So we have a new technology with enhanced multispectral imaging, and a new technology which we call transmissive light imaging. And this is a very peculiar thing. This is imaging not by looking upon a given folio, but sending the light through the folio so that you can see where there are some traces of characters because they left the parchment a bit thinner than other parts. On this basis, we have meanwhile received new results. The reading rate has increased by about 30%, and the identification of undetermined folios has been possible. We have a big expansion of the Albanian lexicon. We have a determination of undocumented characters. The Albanian grammar has been clarified to a big extent, and we can also determine the codicological structure of the original manuscripts. Let me just get into a few details. For the identification of undetermined folios and the expansion of the lexicon, we may start with these two folios, which actually are parts of the same folio. And this is one of the two folios that we were not able to identify in the edition of 2008. You can see that there is something underneath, but you cannot make it out, neither with the color images nor with any other image we had at hand until 2008. Now with the transmissive light image, everything has changed a lot, and you can see now if the light goes through the parchment folio from beneath, then you can see the lines of the Albanian text, and then you can further process the images, and you receive an image like the one on the right-hand side, which is easily and perfectly well readable. And so we were able to establish not only to identify the passage that we have here, which is John 21, 8 to 12, but also to establish the text in toto, except for what is simply cut off or burned off. And this is an important piece of text because it gives us a lot of new words that have not been attested before, like et for the net, or shun for the fish, krompesun for drag, arkun of coal, beg, very big, bartesun part, rappesun dine, kul ihesun there, and my favorite, which is the number 153. This is the number of fish that Peter caught in the lake, which is vuqa chibetzar in Albanian, and this means literally 7 times 20 plus 13. So Albanian had a vigesimal way of counting, like several other Caucasian languages have. Georgian has only remnants of that, but this is perfect because 7 times 20 is 140 plus 13, which is 153. This was already the state of art that I could report on 4 years ago. Now I go beyond, because meanwhile I have finished the complete new reading of all the folios on the basis of the new images that we have, and I can now report on very many new findings. So we have many new words, and I begin with the words that match Udi words of today. Just a word as to what Udi is. Many of you will know that Udi is one of the East Caucasian languages pertaining to the group of Lesbic languages, and Udi has been claimed to be something like the successor of Albanian for quite some time. Now we can prove that this is correct, even though there may be some minor dialectal differences. This is just like the case of Old Armenian Garabar and modern East Armenian, or Old Georgian Khanmeti and modern Georgian. There are some differences, but in general, the Udi language is the successor of Albanian. And this is proven by all these words. So, Mugrai is the bridegroom, Udi Mugho. Ushe is the evening, Udi Ushe. Kur, Hola Hala, Udi Kur. Kut, bit, Udi Kutor is probably a plural. Kur for the rock, and Udi Kur. Bost Esun means rap, and obviously pertains to Bost Un in Udi, which means throw or hurl. Ot Pesun, swallow, is Udi Och Pesun. Kap Pesun, hurry up, is Udi Kapsun. Ochi, the lump or clod, is Udi Ochi. Chup Pesun for spit is Udi Chupsun. Goei, the ruler or leader, seems to be a compound consisting of Go and A of good command. And Bisesun for smear, anoint, is also one of the new words that we now have. And there are some other new autochthonous words, or words at least of which we do not know a foreign origin, and which have no counterpart in Udi, because Udi has lost about 50% of the Albanian lexicon, which was replaced by either Azeri words or Russian words. So Orgaun for rejection, Akraun for garment, Charakos for the towel, Hebetresun for acquire, Naata Bogesun for row, Bumberjuch for neighbors, Goachun for arms, Hül for alien, and Bekresun for choose are all new words that were not yet known in 2008 when we produced the edition and the lexicon pertaining to the edition. A few more words: Chidi for the breast, Ilmir for care, Ochoi for vinegar, and Gin for gall or bile, all from the same part of St. John's Gospel. And some words that we did have in our edition of 2008 had to be corrected. So waves are Voljaruch, not Wotzaruch. The clothes are Tenich and not Temnich. And the animal is Amuzhitze and not Amunhitze. And this is interesting because it has the same background as Greek alogos or Armenian anasun or Georgian pirukru, meaning the thing that doesn't speak. And of course we also have lots of new Iranian loanwords. This conference is dedicated not only to the Caucasus but also to Iran, and so we should of course mention that Albanian shares with Armenian and Georgian the peculiarity that from the beginning on there were lots of Iranian words that enter the language, and from those words we now have a few more, namely, for example, jam for the hour or time, which is identical with Armenian jam and Georgian jami. Then the Ark of the Covenant is taban gidaguvoy, and gidaguvoy corresponds to Armenian gitakaran or Georgian kidobani. And then we have the two words for the stadium, which are Aspares in Armenian and Vitavan in Armenian, and Asparesi and Utevani in Georgian. And here we have Aspares now, and also Bituan. So both Iranian words for the stadium were also transferred into Albanian. You see the word Aspares here, just to give you an impression of how difficult it still is to read the words, even under the conditions of the new images. But anyway, there is no doubt that we have Aspares here. A few other loanwords may be from other languages, like Armenian, for example. So we have a word for the jar or jug, which is dol, Armenian doir, still pronounced obviously with a l and not r at that time. And then we have mystique, zopaun, for the hyssop plant, which is Armenian mishtik zopai. So the question then is whether this is a loanword from Armenian or via Armenian. There are at least 3 or 4 Georgian loanwords in Albanian. One is saburzel for the seed or sea, which is Georgian savdzeli. In the addition, we still have believed that this is saurzel, but the character in question is certainly now read as a b. And something that is even more important are Semitisms that we can now list up. We had already noted in the edition that the name of the lake Shiloah, which you see in the middle here, the name of the lake Siloam in Greek, where Jesus healed the blind man, is Shiloah with a sh in Albanian. And this is something that agrees with Syriac, where the name of the lake is Shiluha, as against Armenian Siloam and Georgian Siloam, which accord with Greek Siloam. So we here may infer that there was a Syriac layer, so to say, in the Bible translation of the Albanians. And the same is now true also for example, the name of Samaria, which is Samaria in Greek and Samaria in Georgian and Armenian, but in Albanian it's Shamaria with the derivatives Shamraun, Shamrauch, which both agree with Syriac Shamraye, Shamrin, etc. So, whenever the Albanian Bible provides a sh, it agrees with Syriac, and in most cases, Armenian and Georgian do no longer or do not show a sh sound but a s sound, which is the effect that in Greek there is no sh sound and all Semitic sh characters were replaced by s in Greek. So Armenian and Georgian reflect a Greek type of the names, whereas Albanian reflects Syriac types. Not in all cases. In the case of the place named Sikar, you can see that here Albanian has an S, and the S agrees with Greek Sikhar, Armenian Sekar, and Georgian Swikar, whereas Syriac has Shachar. So it's true for common names, for names that are well known, but not for all of them. And it's also true for some personal names. So for example, the name of the prophet Isaiah appears as Eshaya in the Gospel of John, and this is exactly the form that we have in Syriac, where it's Eshaya. But in Albanian we also have the other form of the name, namely Isa in the Gospel of Luke. And this corresponds to Greek Isaias, or Armenian Esaya, Georgian Esaya, with the S. So both forms occur side by side. And the same is then also true for the name of Moses now. What we had before is the name for Moses, which is correspondent to Greek Moises and Armenian Moses and Georgian Moshe with an S. But now we have Moshe, and Moshe is identical with what we have in Syriac, Moshe with a sh. And here you can see an example for the name Moshe written in Albanian. Let's come to the determination of undocumented characters. As I said, the Albanian alphabet list in the Matandararan manuscript contains 52 letters, and of the 52 letters, 3 have not yet been found in the Palimpsests when the edition was produced in 2008, namely the 3 red ones here, letters for which we assumed the sound value of ch, j, and j, so 3 affricates, letters number 28, 32, and 34 in the alphabet. Now, in the case of j, it's a bit peculiar that there is no attestation of j, but there might be one. The problem is that I cannot prove it. So the letter j, the 34th letter, should be on this folio, of which we only could make out 2 characters when we produced the edition in 2008. We assumed that this might be John 21, 7-14, Meanwhile, in 2012, I provided a different proposal according to which it's rather John 18:26, because the AO might go with the name, with the word Kahano Bonioya, which is the genitive plural of the high priests, of the high priests. Yeah. Now with the transmissive light images, we can read the 2 pages completely, and now we can prove that we were right. Yes, this is John 18:26, but the AO does not pertain to Kahanau Hoibanioya, but to the next word, which also had AO, Chinyaoen, so it's the relative and not the high priest that is written with AO in the middle of this page. So this is now the complete page. Unfortunately, the font doesn't appear again, but you can have an impression of it. Everything that is in black is not there because it was cut off or burnt off, but everything else is actually readable. And at the very end of the first column of the text, we enter into John 18:28. They led Jesus from the lodge of Caiaphas to the palace of the governor. It was morning. And in the middle of the word for the palace, the column ends and it continues in the right-hand column. And the word for the palace that we have here for the first time, it's aspin. So what might the palace be? Well, the answer would be the first letter of the second column in the top of the page, and unfortunately this letter is not visible. There are 2 possibilities. Taking the Georgian place name Aspinza and Georgian Maspinzeli, the word for the host, or Armenian Aspinjakan for hospitable or inn, both coming from Middle Iranian Aspinj, or Parthian Ispenj, hospitality. Then the word for the inn or for the palace that was mentioned here should be a word with either j or z. If it's z, then okay, this is a character that we know because we have it several times. But if it's j, it would be the character that we are looking for. Unfortunately, even if we go deeper into it and try to figure out what is there, we cannot prove either one, although I believe that what we see here, some dots, are remnants of a z and not of a j. So it would be good to have exactly that character, or if the scribe had written that character in the first column, we would have it, but here it was burned off, and it's only the remnants that are visible, and it's not enough to be sure. There is maybe a second case, namely on this folio, which is more heavily damaged, but which was read before in the edition. You can see here that the edge is practically burnt. And nevertheless, with the new images that were provided by the Sinai Palincests project, you can see that there are some remnants of characters there. I go through the different images that they provide. This is what we established for the edition in 2008. And again, we have to expect a word for living, for abode here. And again, what we now can make out is aspin. So it's the same word, and exactly at the same place we have in the Armenian Bible text the same word, namely vank. Vank is obviously the word that was translated by aspinj or aspinz in Albanian. What is missing is again the character that we need, namely the j or z. So you see the double cross, and the double cross, the hashtag sign indicates this is the place where it should be, but we don't see it. So again, it's exactly in the gap that you see here. So there was a devil running around on Mount Sinai who killed all the j or z. Okay, this cannot be read now without the font. And even in the ultraviolet images of 1999, we cannot make it out, even the biggest ones. Nevertheless, I believe that the word in Albanian was rather aspinza, like Georgian aspinza, even though this is only a place name, not aspinja, because the few remnants in the first example that I showed you seem to speak in favor of this. There is a second one that we can now determine with certainty. This is the 28th letter that was taken to mean Chi. In the edition we wrote, the letter is not attested in the Palincests. The assumption that it represents a voiceless, non-glottalized affricate is based upon the letter name appearing as Chai in the alphabet list, which may well represent an original Chai. Glottalized Chi, that means palatalized affricate glottalized Chi, is well attested, but voiced Chi is not, and Chi was not. And now we have it. We can distinguish it now from a letter that is very similar and with which we confused it. So this is an example again from the lectionary. It's Matthew 10 and 5. And here you see the character in question. And the word that we have here is the word that we read as at-SBI, meaning to lose. And this is what we wrote in the edition in the Lexicon, at-SBI and some other forms. But now we can compare it, the two letters that are very similar, namely T and Ch. And the letter T is on the top right corner, and the letter Ch is in the bottom line, highlighted here. And we can put them together and you see the difference. The difference consists in the fact that the T has a tail to the left, which the Ch has not, and only with the new images we could make this out. And now we have some examples of Ch. This is another one. I will not go into details, but you can see it here. And having determined in this word for to lose or for to get lost or to destroy that this is Ch and not T, we can now see that the word is the same as what we have in Udi, namely Achesun or Achespesun for lose, and Udi Achi means lost. This is actually the same word. So all cases where we read T in the edition must be checked. And the Unicode glyph, if you look into the Unicode representation of Caucasian Albanian, must be corrected because the letter form is not as we have it in the alphabet list, but we can now show that it's much more vertical. A few words as to the clarification of the Albanian grammar. The verbal morphology that we established in the edition differs to some extent from what we have in modern Udi. The present tense was, among others, formed by an infix with e or le or re, and we now have a lot of new words showing this. For example, the present tense of the word for washing, which is botskesun and not watskesun, as we thought in the edition, has the present botseka, and the second person singular, botsekun. Other examples for this infix present are alepa for apesun, to reach, or olepa for opesun, to kindle. And a very important thing is that the verbal ending or the personal marker of the second person singular now regularly appears not as nun, if it's not combined with the past tense form, but as un. We had only two examples in the edition, namely aun za, I know you, and mak un dare, you shall not give. And now we have upun ok un, you say, baun you do, irun you go, besun you wish, botsekun you are washing, mak un botskai, you should not wash, and tapekun you shall offer. So un is the ending or the personal marker for the second person singular, and this yields a very new hypothesis as to the emergence of the variant of the personal marker, which is nun. We have lots of new things in word formation that are peculiar. We have new numerals. I already talked about vuqa chibetzar. We now have sak or ro for 25, sak or witz for 30, all corresponding to their Udi correspondences. Hotze for 15, which is Udi Hotze. And we have a few of replicated adjectives like boni, boni, and beg, beg for very big. This is just the same type as Armenian metza, metz, and is used to translate it. And we have a few suffixes with a clearer function now. Nya and karnya and chinya for kinsman, in Tochanien, fig tree, or Pachin, gardener, and in Orno for the twin, which literally means one of the two. And then we have three very interesting names for languages, namely Hebrew, Greek, and Latin, which are Ebraunesh, Yunaunesh, and Dalmataunesh. In John 19:20, this is about the reading that was established on the cross of Jesus Christ. In the addition, we had still presumed that the three languages were named Acharnya, Elaunya, and Romaunya, meaning Jewish, Hellenic, Roman. Well, we now have the new photos, the new images, and they show us not very clearly, but sufficiently clearly, that Hebrew is Ebraunesh, written in Hebrew, that Latin is Dalmataunesh, and that Greek is Yunaunesh. If we compare the three languages as they are named in the other biblical traditions, we have Greek, Hebraisti, Romaisti, Hellenisti. In Georgian we have quite the same, Hebraelebra, Romaelebra, and Berzel. In Syriac we have Hebraid, and Yaunaid, and Rumaid. But in Albanian we have Ebraunesh, Dalmataunesh, and Yunaunesh, and this corresponds exactly only to what we have in Armenian, Hebraetzeren, Dalmataren, and Yunaren. So this is again one of the indications of the close affinity of the Albanian Bible translation to the Armenian text, and one of the proofs, I would say, that this is a translation from Armenian. Why was Latin called Dalmatian, one might ask? Well, Frederick Maclay in 1919 proposed this might be an indication of a translation date of the Armenian Gospels after 527, because then took place the reintegration of Dalmatia into the East Roman Empire by Justinian. But this is simply impossible that the Armenian Bible translation should be so late, 527, and the Albanian even later. In contrast to this, Beda Künstler proposed that this is an indication of the Christianization of Armenia during the reign of the Dalmatian Emperor Diocletian, who ruled between 284 and 305, and this is exactly the time period that we normally assume to be the beginning of the Bible translation into Armenian. The Roman suzerainty over this part of the Caucasus was acknowledged in 298, and so this might be indicated. Diocletian, was a Roman emperor, but he came from Dalmatia, so they named his language Dalmatian. In any case, this is a clear indication not only that the Albanian Bible translation was done on the basis of the Armenian, but also gives us a terminus a quo for the emergence of both. So, let me end with a short outlook on a new project that I've only just started in April of this year, which is called Delicate, short for the Development of Literacy in the Caucasian Territories, a project financed by the European Research Council and run at the University of Hamburg, the Center for the Study of Manuscript Cultures, where I am now busy after retiring from Frankfurt. The starting point of the project are the three Caucasian literary languages, which emerged with their Christianization in about the 5th century, as we have seen maybe even the 4th century, with individual script. This is important. All three developed their own scripts, or for all three different scripts were developed: Armenian, Georgian, and Albanian. The project aims to establish the interdependencies in the writing systems, that means paleographic correspondencies, in the Bible translation, for example, the question whether the traces of Syriac that we have seen in the Albanian text might have been traces of an older Armenian Bible translation that was made on the basis of Syriac, as many people have assumed on different grounds. But also the development of literary canons in homiletics, hagiography, and maybe even hymnography. There are some immediate tasks also of the project that you will hopefully see soon, for example, the new editions of the Albanian palimpsest of Mount Sinai and also of the Armenian palimpsest. As you've seen, we have so many new readings and so much new materials that simply a new edition is necessary, the old one is obsolete. And also first editions of lots of Georgian palimpsests, basing ourselves on projects that were financed by the Volkswagen Foundation in the past 12 or so years, and also of Armenian palimpsests of the Matinaran that were produced by another project financed by the Volkswagen Foundation between 2018 and this year. And I hope that very many new materials will still come to the light. Unfortunately, I must tell you that we have not yet found any further Albanian palimpsests. You cannot read the Albanian word for I thank you, but I will tell you it's Uhekaz us, and this is what I want to say at the end. Thank you.